Hello there, and welcome to Sleepy Orbit Channel. Tonight we are going to spend a long and unhurried stretch of hours in orbit around one planet and one small puzzle. And the puzzle is this. Saturn wears the most famous ornament in the solar system, a set of rings so wide that you could lay the whole distance between the Earth and the Moon across them and have room to spare. And yet through most of their span, those rings are only about 10 meters thick. The height of a house, they are enormous, and they are almost nothing at all. From here they look permanent, carved, fixed in place, the sort of thing that has always been there and always will be. And they are none of those things. Every particle in them is traveling many kilometers every second, faster than anything you have ever watched move. And yet nothing in that whole immense disk ever appears to be in a hurry. Nothing rushes. Nothing arrives. That is the shape of tonight, and it is a comfortable shape to lie down inside. How a thing can be so wide and so thin, so fast and so patient, so ancient and so temporary, all at the same time, and be perfectly at ease about it. We will take the long way around. We will begin with the people who first turned their imperfect little telescopes towards that pale yellow point and could not make sense of what they saw, and who spent whole lifetimes not quite understanding it, which is its own kind of comfort. Then we will look at what the rings actually are, close up, in the hand, what they are made of, how the pieces are sized, how the whole vast structure manages to be flatter than anything else we know of. Then we will sit with the physics itself, the unhurried mechanics of orbits and touches and resonances, and with the small moons that live inside the gaps and write their names into the ice. And then, towards the end, we will follow the rings forward and backward in time, to where they came from, and to where they are going, and to what it means that you and I happen to be alive during the particular chapter when they are here to be seen. If you find this useful for falling asleep, a like or a subscribe helps the channel reach other people also lying awake at this hour. That is all. It costs you nothing, and you can forget about it immediately. None of this needs anything from you tonight. There is nothing here to follow, nothing to remember, nothing you will be asked about in the morning. Let your shoulders ease down away from your ears. Let your jaw come unclenched. Let your hands rest wherever they have fallen, and let the weight of you settle a little further into the mattress, and let the breath out slowly, and let it come back in on its own. Let's begin. In the summer of 1610, in a room in Padua, where the air smelled of tallow and damp plaster, a man in his 40s leaned toward a tube of wood and leather, no longer than his forearm, and looked at Saturn for the first time that any human being ever had. The lens at the far end was a disc of glass he had ground himself, or supervised the grinding of, and it was not very good glass by any standard we would use now. It carried a faint greenish cast, the color of river water held up to a window. It had bubbles in it, tiny trapped breaths from the furnace, and each of those bubbles bent the light a little the wrong way. Through that imperfect little tube, Galileo saw something he could not name, and because he could not name it, he described it instead, which is often what people do at the exact moment understanding begins. He saw 3 bodies. That is what he wrote. Not one planet, but 3. A large round one in the middle, and 2 smaller ones pressed up against its sides, one on the left and one on the right, touching it, or very nearly touching it, and never moving apart from it the way a moon would move. He called them companions. He wondered whether Saturn had attendants that never wandered. In other letters, he described the shape differently, reaching for whatever ordinary object was nearest to hand in his mind. and what he reached for were ears or handles, as though Saturn were a cup that some enormous potter had thrown on a wheel and fitted with grips on either side so that it could be lifted. There is something disarming about that image. A man looking at one of the largest and least human things in creation, and the word that came to him was the word for the part of a jug you hold. You have to picture the practical facts of that observation to feel the tenderness of it. You have to picture the cold, because these were unheated rooms in northern Italian winters, and the best seeing came on the coldest, driest nights, so the price of a clear sky was numb fingers and a body that would not stop shivering, and shivering shakes a telescope. You have to picture the candle, set carefully behind him or below him, so that its light fell on the paper and not into the eye, and the way a candle flame moves constantly, so that the page seemed to breathe under his hand. You have to picture the eyepiece itself, a small circle of glass in a brass or wooden ring, cold enough against the skin of the eye socket that it stung for the first few seconds, and then warmed to the temperature of his face and fogged with the moisture of his own breath, so that every few minutes he had to pull back and wipe it and wait for it to clear. And through that stinging, fogging, thumbnail-sized window, unsteady with cold and with heartbeat, he was looking at an unfinished snowfall, though there was no possible way for him to know it. The flakes were suspended mid-descent, in a fall that had begun before anything on this planet had eyes at all, and he saw them as handles on a jug. Then, 2 years later, they were gone. In 1612 he looked again, and Saturn was a plain round disk, unadorned, with no companions and no ears, and nothing at all to distinguish it from the other wandering lights. He checked. He looked on other nights. He wrote, with a bewilderment that comes through the centuries entirely intact, asking what had happened, whether the appendages had been some deception of his own glass, whether Saturn had somehow consumed its own attendants. He never fully resolved it. He lived another 30 years and went blind in the last of them, and died without knowing that nothing had been consumed and nothing had vanished. Saturn's axis is tilted, and it takes nearly 30 of our years to go once around the sun, and so twice in each of those long circuits the rings turn precisely edge-on to us. They are staggeringly wide and almost unbelievably thin, in some regions no thicker than the height of a house, a sheet of ice spread across a distance greater than the gap between the Earth and the Moon, and yet flatter, proportionally, than any sheet of paper that has ever been made. Turn a sheet like that sideways, and it disappears. The snow had not stopped falling. It had merely presented its edge, the way a held blade of grass becomes a line and then becomes nothing at all as you rotate it in your fingers. 4 decades later, in Holland, a young man named Christian Huygens decided the problem was not with Saturn but with the glass, and he did the slow thing about it. He and his brother ground their own lenses, working the glass against a mold with abrasive and water, hour after hour, checking the curve, going back to it, and the work was tedious in a way that does not photograph well and does not make legends. It is simply a man at a bench turning a disc. For years. The lenses that came out of that patience were long focus and remarkably free of the color fringes that had haunted every earlier view, and with them, in the 1650s, he saw what Galileo's bubbled green glass could never have shown him. Not companions, not handles, not 2 objects pressed against a third, but a single continuous band encircling the planet, separate from it all the way around. He wrote that Saturn is girdled by a thin flat ring, inclined to the plane of its orbit, and touching the planet nowhere, touching it nowhere. It is worth sitting with the strangeness that phrase must have carried in a century when everything in the heavens was assumed to be carried on spheres or held in place by something. Here was a structure with nothing beneath it, and nothing above it, and nothing holding it to the world it surrounded, hanging in the dark by no visible means, and a patient man with sore hands had reasoned it out from smudges of light. He was so unsure of how it would be received that he first published the claim as a scrambled anagram, a jumble of letters that meant nothing until he chose to unscramble it, a way of staking a claim on an idea while leaving himself room to be wrong. That, too, is tender. The caution of it, the wish to be right, and the fear of being laughed at, preserved for us in a line of nonsense Latin. And then, in 1675, at the observatory in Paris, Giovanni Cassini looked at that single ring and noticed that it was not single. There was a line across it, a dark lane, thin and curved, following the ring all the way around and dividing the bright band into an inner portion and an outer one, like the seam where two things that were made separately have been laid beside each other. He had better instruments than Huygens, and worse eyes than he probably admitted, and the gap he found is not truly empty, and it is not truly a seam, and the explanation for it involves the rhythms of distant moons pulling at particular orbits over and over until those orbits are swept thin. He knew none of that. He knew only that there was a division, and he recorded it, and it carries his name to this day, which is a modest and rather lovely form of afterlife. None of these three men learned the full answer. Galileo died bewildered. Huygens went to his grave believing the ring was solid, a rigid hoop of some material, which it cannot possibly be. Cassini named a gap without knowing what dug it. Each of them handed a partial thing forward to someone not yet born, and each of them accepted, without much complaint, that the handing forward was the whole of what they would get. That is a kind of patience that matches the object they were looking at rather well. They were slow observers of a slow thing, and neither the observers nor the thing seemed to mind. Understanding arrived the way the ice arrives, in increments too small to notice within a single life, passed from one cold room to the next across 100 and more years, until a shape that had once looked like the handles of a jug had become a band, and the band had become two bands, and the two bands were waiting to become what they truly are, because here is the thing that settles over you when you hold all of it at once. The snow was already ancient when the first human eye found it. Whatever set those countless pieces of ice loose around Saturn, the shattering of a moon, the tearing apart of a comet that drifted too close, the long shedding of material from a body that could not hold itself together, had happened and finished and become history long before there were people, long before there was language, long before anyone thought to grind a lens. And the fall had not landed. It has not landed yet. The ground is down there, the pale banded cloud tops turning under all that suspended ice, and the flakes drift toward it at a pace so unhurried that 1,000 human lifetimes register as nothing at all. Galileo caught it mid-descent. Huygens caught it mid-descent. Cassini caught it mid-descent. Every observer who has ever leaned into a cold eyepiece and drawn what they saw by candlelight was catching a single frozen instant of a snowfall in progress. And the instant they caught and the instant you are picturing now are, on the timescale of the fall itself, the very same instant. We happen to be here in the middle of it. That is all. We arrived partway through. We will leave partway through, and the snow goes on descending, patient and unbothered, toward a ground that is in no hurry to receive it. If you could bring your face close to the rings, closer than any camera has ever managed, close enough that the great sweeping arcs stopped being arcs at all and became simply the space in front of you. The first thing you would notice is that there is nothing there to touch. There is no sheet. There is no plate of ice laid flat around the planet like the lid of a jar. No membrane, no pane of frozen glass with a surface you could rest your palm against. And there is no smoke either, no haze, no drifting veil of powder, nothing that would part around your hand and close again behind it. What is actually there, filling the space in every direction, is a crowd of separate things, individual objects, countless, uncounted, each one a small, solid body traveling on a path of its own, each one keeping to that path with a fidelity that has outlasted every empire, every language, every act of remembering that has ever happened anywhere. The rings are not a thing. The rings are a multitude, and the multitude only looks like a thing from far enough away. And the thing each of those bodies is made of is almost absurdly ordinary. It is water ice. Not exotic ice, not some pressurized alien phase with a name of its own, but the same substance that gathers on the inside of a freezer. The same substance that comes down through streetlight in December. The same substance you have scraped off a windscreen with the edge of a card while your breath went white in front of you. More than 9 parts in 10 of the ring material is frozen water. The remainder, the last 1/10 or less, is a faint dusting of rocky and carbon-bearing matter, so sparse that it barely tints anything, a trace of grit stirred through an enormous whiteness. That single fact is the reason the rings look the way they look. Ice reflects. Dirty things absorb. And because Saturn's rings are so nearly clean, so close to unmixed water, they throw back the great majority of the sunlight that falls on them, which is why they burn white against the black in every image ever made of them, and why the earliest observers, squinting through instruments barely better than a jam jar, could see that something bright was there long before anyone could say what. Now let the crowd resolve, and notice the sizes. The distribution is not uniform, and it is not random. It runs from the almost invisible to the surprisingly large, and there is more of the small than the large at every step down the scale. There are grains finer than sugar, finer than the frost that forms overnight on a pane, drifting by in numbers that no arithmetic will ever pin down. There are pieces the size of a marble, the size of a plum, the size of a snowball packed by cold hands. There are pieces the size of your fist, and pieces the size of a football turning end over end without hurry, and pieces the size of a suitcase, and pieces the size of a parked car, and pieces the size of a small house with rooms in it, and then, rarest of all, scattered thinly through the population like the occasional old tree in a young wood, there are bodies tens of meters across, ice hills, slow tumbling boulders that would take you a long walk to circle on foot if there were any foot to walk with, and any gravity worth the name to hold you down. Most of what surrounds you, though, is modest. Most of what surrounds you would fit in your 2 hands. Each one of them is an independent object. This is the part that takes a moment to settle into, because everything in your experience of crowds argues against it. Each grain, each snowball, each boulder is on its own orbit around Saturn, obeying nothing but the pull of the planet and the tug of its neighbors, going around at its own speed determined by nothing but its distance out. They are not held together. Nothing binds them. There is no scaffolding, no glue, no frozen lattice locking one to the next. They travel in company without ever really being in company, and because the pieces at any given distance are nearly all moving at nearly the same speed in nearly the same direction. They almost never meet in any way that deserves a stronger word than a nudge. When two of them do come together, it happens at the pace of a leaf settling onto water, a closing speed slower than a walk, sometimes slower than the drift of a boat against a mooring. They touch, they press, they part. Nothing shatters, nothing cries out. The whole enormous structure is a collision in permanent slow motion, and the collisions are so mild that they read less like impacts and more like two sleeping bodies adjusting under the same blanket. Look closer at one, and it will not look like the polished jewel you might expect. Ice out here is not the clear ice of a tumbler. It is rough. It is frosted, matted, coarse-grained, pocked and pitted from long ages of tiny impacts and the slow work of sunlight on frozen surfaces. Much of it is porous, riddled with empty space, so light for its size that it would surprise you to lift it. And a great many of the larger pieces are not really single pieces at all, but loose aggregates. Gatherings of smaller lumps that have drifted together and stayed, held only by the faintest mutual attraction, the way damp snow holds itself in the shape your glove gave it. Close your fingers around one of those, and it would come apart. Not violently, not with a crack, just a giving way, a dissolution into the pieces it was always secretly made of, each fragment continuing along on its own terms, as if it had merely been waiting for permission. They are handfuls of packed snow that no one packed, and they are as fragile as that sounds, and their fragility has cost them nothing at all in the long ages they have kept it. And this, more than anything, is what the rings are. A snow that started falling a very long time ago and has not yet reached the ground. The ground is there, far below, the pale-banded cloud tops of Saturn turning at their own unhurried rate, waiting the way ground always waits. The flakes are here, suspended in mid-descent, sorted by size, brilliant, unhurried, taking their time in a way that no snowfall on any world with weather has ever been allowed to take. We simply happen to have arrived in the middle of the fall. We happen to be looking during the part where the snow is in the air. The light they fall in is a particular light, and it is worth letting your eyes adjust to it. Saturn stands about 9.5 times further from the Sun than the Earth does, and because light thins out with the square of the distance, what arrives there is roughly 100th of what arrives at your window. The Sun is not a disk you could stand under. It is a small, fierce point, brilliant to look at but too far away to warm anything, giving the kind of illumination you get on a winter afternoon under high cloud, an hour before dusk, when everything outside has gone pale and level and shadowless. And yet in that thin light, nothing looks dim, because everything you can see is white. The ice takes that 100th of a sunbeam and gives most of it straight back. You are in a landscape lit by a distant lamp and floored, walled, ceilinged with mirrors made of frost. The brightness does not come from the sun. The brightness comes from what the sun is falling on. There is no sound in any of it. The nudges make none. The tumbling makes none. The vast wheeling of the whole population makes none, and so the scene arrives entirely through your eyes, white on black, motion without noise, an enormous industry of turning that has never once needed to announce itself. If you held out an arm, you would find the nearest neighbor further away than it looked, and the one beyond that further again. And the crowd would keep opening in front of you like a snowfall does when you walk into it. And what stays with you, in the end, is not the scale of it, but the smallness, not the hundreds of thousands of kilometers, but the single piece the size of your fist, turning end over end a few meters from where you float, tracing an ellipse it worked out for itself long before anyone existed to admire it. It is not being carried. It is not part of anything. It belongs to no formation and takes no instruction, and its path is not a compromise struck with the pieces around it, but a private arrangement between that one lump of frost and the planet below. Every one of them has that. Every grain finer than sugar, every ice hill tens of meters across, every crumbling handful of unpacked snow, each of them has its own orbit, its own answer, its own unhurried line through the dark, held to for so long and so faithfully that the holding has stopped being an effort and become simply what that piece is. The rings are the most public thing in the solar system, visible through a child's first instrument, printed on the covers of books, and up close they turn out to be an assembly of solitudes, each one keeping to itself, each one perfectly at ease. Each one falling toward a ground it is in no hurry whatsoever to reach. Let your attention drift now to the shape of the thing itself, to its proportions, because the proportions are the strangest and most tender fact about Saturn's rings, stranger even than the ice and the orbits and the long arithmetic of their turning. From the inner edge of the main rings to the outer edge, the span is something close to 280,000 kilometers. Lay that measurement out in your mind against a distance you already know. The moon rides about 384,000 kilometers from the Earth, and if you took the main rings and stretched them along that gap, they would cover most of the way, most of the journey. Nearly all the empty dark that separates our world from its companion, filled edge to edge with a spinning field of ice. That is the width. That is the horizontal fact, the enormous one, the one that makes the rings visible from a back garden through a small telescope on a clear night in October. And now the other fact, the vertical one, the one that almost refuses to be believed. Through most of that immense extent, the rings are about 10 meters thick. 10 meters, in places rather less than that. The height of a house with an attic. The depth of the deep end of a public swimming pool, the part you had to be brave to swim across as a child. You could stand at the bottom, and the top of the ring would be a few body lengths above your head. That is the whole thickness of a structure 280,000 kilometers wide. Not thin for its size, in the way a page is thin for its size. Thin in a way that has no everyday comparison. Thin in a way you have to build up to slowly. The way you build up to a very large number by climbing it one step at a time. So climb it. Imagine shrinking the main rings down until the whole disk, edge to edge, is the width of a football pitch. 100 meters or so of grass, goalposts at either end, the white lines painted fresh. At that scale, how thick is the ring? Not a finger, not a coin, not a page. At that scale, the ring would be far thinner than a sheet of paper. Thinner, in fact, than the film of a soap bubble stretched across a child's plastic wand, thinner than the shimmering skin of it just before it breaks. Shrink the disc to the size of a dinner plate, and the ring becomes something you could not photograph edge on at all, a mathematical suggestion of a surface rather than a surface. And this is not an exaggeration made for effect. This is simply the ratio, worked out honestly, the way you would work out the ratio of anything else. Think for a moment about what that would mean to your senses if you were there. Approach the rings from directly above, and they fill the sky, an immense floor of light stretching past the limits of your vision in every direction. So wide that its far edge is lost in perspective. Approach them exactly edge on from the plane itself, and they vanish. Not fade, vanish, closing like an eyelid, becoming a dark line ruled across the face of the planet, a hairline scratch where a moment before there had been a world's worth of ice. The whole difference between everything and nothing is a few degrees of viewing angle, and there would be no sound to mark the change, no rush of passing material, no hiss of frost. Only that appearing and disappearing, repeated whenever your path carried you across the level of the disk, as reliable and undramatic as a page turning. The flatness is not decoration. Nobody arranged it. It is not a design choice by a universe with an eye for elegance, though it happens to look elegant. The flatness is inevitable, and understanding why it is inevitable is one of the most restful pieces of physics there is, because it is the physics of a system putting itself in order, without effort and without hurry. Consider a single lump of ice, somewhere out in the bright part of the disk, on an orbit that is tilted very slightly, a fraction of a degree away from the plane everything else is following. That tilt means the lump rises a little above the disk on one side of Saturn and sinks a little below it on the other, threading up and down through the crowd like a needle through cloth, once every orbit. And every time it passes through, it has a chance of meeting something. A neighbor, another piece of ice going almost exactly the same way, but not quite. The meeting is not a collision in any sense that would alarm you. These are not impacts. The relative speeds, where the ice meets the ice, are measured in centimeters per second, slower than you walk down a corridor, slower than a curtain moving in a draught. Two snowballs meet at the pace of a drifting balloon, touch, deform a little, take some of each other's motion, and drift apart again a fraction less energetic than before. But the up and down part of the motion, the vertical part, the part that carried the lump out of the plane, is exactly the part that gets traded away first, spread among neighbors, dissipated into the faint warmth of frost pressing against frost. Round and round the orbits go, and each pass shaves the tilt down a little more, and the lump settles closer and closer to the level everyone else is keeping. The disk irons itself flat. It has been ironing itself flat for a very long time. Nothing supervises it. It is simply what happens when countless small things share a space and keep bumping into one another patiently enough, for long enough, until the only motion left is the motion they all agree on. Now let the eye travel outward, and let the architecture come to you by name. Because the rings are not one object, but a series of neighborhoods, each with its own texture and its own light. Nearest to the planet lies the D-ring, faint and dusty, so tenuous you could look straight through it and see the cloud tops beyond, a haze of fine particles standing closest of all to the ground that waits far below. Beyond it the C-ring begins, wider and brighter, though brighter here is a modest word. The C-ring has an almost translucent look, the look of frosted glass held up to a lamp, and through it the planet's banded face shows as a smeared and dimmer version of itself. Then the B-ring, and everything changes. The B-ring is the dense one, the brilliant one, the one that holds the great majority of the mass of the entire system, packed so thickly with ice that almost no light gets through at all, its surface crowded with spokes and ripples and knots of material that gather and disperse and gather again as the hours pass. Beyond the B-ring lies the Cassini division, that dark band you can see from a garden telescope, and here is the correction that makes it lovelier. The division is not empty. It is not a gap in any absolute sense, not a slice of nothing carved out with a blade. It is simply sparse, thinned out by a resonance with the moon Mimas, whose steady pull has swept the region into something more like open moorland than a wall. Ice still travels there. There is just far less of it, and so it reads as a shadow from a distance. Past the division comes the A-ring, bright again and finely ruled, and within it 2 narrow clearings kept open by tiny shepherding moons, the Enki Gap, tended by a moonlet called Pan, and the slender Keeler Gap near the outer edge, where a moon named Daphnis raises delicate waves along the walls of ice on either side as it passes, like a hand drawn along the surface of water. And further out still, past the crisp outer boundary of the A-ring, the system loosens and becomes stranger. There is the F-ring, narrow as a drawn thread, braided and kinked and endlessly rearranged by the 2 small moons that flank it, and far beyond that, so faint that it took spacecraft to confirm it properly, the E-ring spreads across an immense volume of space, a broad and tenuous cloud of microscopic ice grains. And we know now where they come from. The little moon Enceladus, venting plumes of water from fractures near its south pole, feeding the ring continuously with a fine mist of its own ocean. One small world exhaling, and the breath becoming a halo wider than most planets. Hold all of it together for a moment. Something 280,000 kilometers across, ordered into named bands and divisions and gaps and braids, visible across 1 billion kilometers of space, one of the few structures in the solar system a human being can recognize instantly. And it is, by mass and by substance, almost nothing at all. Gather every particle in the main rings into one body, and you would have a moon smaller than our own, a modest thing you could name and forget. All that presence, spread out so thin that presence becomes the wrong word for it. It is a snow that began falling long ago and has not yet reached the ground, and the fall has spread itself so wide and so level that you could pass a hand through it and hardly know. Flakes suspended mid-descent, arranged in bands by the patient pull of moons, drifting downward so slowly that the descent has outlasted every civilization and will outlast a great many more. The ground waits far below, banded in cream and gold, unhurried about receiving what is owed to it. And you, resting here, are simply present in the middle of the falling, a witness to a snowfall that has not landed, that is not in any hurry to land, that has all the time there is. There is a temptation, when you first see the rings in a photograph, to imagine them as a single object, one enormous sheet of something pale and solid, a lid laid flat around the planet, a disk cut from ivory and set spinning on a hidden spindle. It is such an easy picture to hold. It is such a comfortable picture too, because a solid thing is a thing you can name and hold and be done with. But the rings are not that, and the reason they are not that is one of the tenderest pieces of reasoning anyone has ever done with nothing but a pencil, a sheet of paper, and a long, unhurried patience with numbers. In 1859, a young Scottish physicist named James Clerk Maxwell sat down with that question and worked it through. And what he found was that a solid ring around Saturn could not survive. Not for 1,000,000 years, not for 1,000, not really for any length of time at all. Something that broad and that thin, held together as one rigid body, would be pulled harder on the side nearer the planet than on the side further away, and the difference between those pulls would not balance. The slightest wobble would grow. The ring would drift a little off-center, and the drift would feed itself, and the whole structure would strain and buckle and come apart. Maxwell showed the same for a ring made of liquid. Waves would run around it and swell until it broke into pieces. The only arrangement that survived his mathematics was the one that is actually there, not a disk at all, but an uncountable crowd of separate bodies, each one going around Saturn entirely on its own account, each one obeying the same law that governs a moon or a comet or a thrown stone. And each one, from far enough away, blurring into the appearance of a smooth, pale sheet. So what you are looking at, when you look at that sheet, is a snow that began falling a very long time ago and has not yet reached the ground. Each flake is an ice boulder on its own private orbit. The ground is the cloud tops of Saturn, waiting far below, banded and mild. And we happen to be here, alive and looking, in the middle of the fall. Now hold that crowd in your mind and let it move, because the way it moves is the heart of everything. Anything orbiting a planet obeys a simple bargain: the closer in you are, the faster you must travel to keep from falling, and the further out you are, the slower you may go. This is Kepler's third law, and it sounds like arithmetic until you let yourself watch it. The inner edge of the bright rings goes all the way around Saturn in something under 6 hours, a full circuit, a complete lap of a world 9 times wider than Earth, in less time than a night's sleep. The outer edge of the main rings takes about 14 hours for the same journey. Between those two edges lies every intermediate speed, laid out in an unbroken gradient, no step, no seam, no jump. So the rings do not turn the way a record turns, all of a piece, every groove keeping formation with every other groove. The rings turn the way water turns in a wide, slow river, where the middle outruns the banks. Every lane is overtaking the lane outside it. Every lane is being overtaken by the lane inside it. The whole system is sliding past itself, forever, and has been doing so since long before there was anyone to describe it. Picture yourself set down on one of those ice boulders, somewhere in the broad, bright middle of the fall. Picture the planet filling half the sky beneath you, its bands the colors of cream and weak tea, turning with a slowness that reads as patience. Picture the neighbors. A boulder the size of a car a little way off, a chunk the size of a house beyond that, a haze of fragments no bigger than sugar between them all. And now notice what you would notice most, which is how little seems to be happening. You are traveling at something like 50,000 kilometers in an hour. Your neighbors are traveling at very nearly the same speed. The difference between you and the boulder just inside your orbit, over the whole width of a stone's throw, amounts to a few millimeters each second. That is the crucial number, and it is the reason none of this is violent. Speeds through the system are enormous. Speeds between neighbors are almost nothing. Everyone is racing, and nobody is racing anybody else. That is why collisions here do not deserve the word collision at all. When two of these bodies drift into one another, and they do, constantly, endlessly, since the moment the fall began, they meet at the pace of someone crossing a room. Sometimes slower, the pace of a hand set down on a table, the pace of a page turning. A boulder eases against a boulder, presses, sheds a little frost, and drifts away again a fraction less energetic than before. There is no bang, and not merely because there is no air to carry one. There is no bang because there is nothing to make a bang out of. It is a nudge, a touch, a settling. It is closer to two boats meeting at a dock than to anything you would call a crash. If you could rest a palm on the ice as it happened, you would feel a pressure build over a second or two, and then ease off. The way a door closes when someone has taken care with it. If you could hear it through the rock, it would be low and brief, more of a settling than a sound, and then nothing. And then, somewhere else in the sheet, the same thing again. And it is happening everywhere at once, in every square meter of a structure 250,000 kilometers across. And it has been happening without pause for a span of time that makes the word ancient sound hasty. Here is what all that touching accomplishes. Every meeting takes away a small share of energy. The energy of random motion. The energy of going the wrong way. The energy of any particle that was traveling out of step with its neighbors. Each nudge converts a little of that disagreement into a whisper of heat, and the heat radiates away into the dark. And what remains is a system very slightly more agreed with itself than it was a moment before. Repeat that beyond counting. A particle on a tilted orbit, riding up and down through the plane, gets tapped back into line by everything it passes through, until its tilt is worn away and it travels level. A particle on a stretched, lopsided orbit finds itself brushing against neighbors who are going around in tidy circles, and each brush rounds it off a little until its path is a circle too. Nothing enforces this. No hand smooths the sheet. The flatness and the roundness are simply what is left over when everything that disagreed has been talked out of disagreeing, one touch at a time. This is why the rings are so astonishingly thin, in most places tens of meters from top to bottom, sometimes as little as 10, a film so slight that if you scaled the whole span down to the width of a city, the sheet would be thinner than the paper Maxwell wrote on. It is not that something pressed them flat. It is that anything sticking out got tapped. And tapped again, and the tapping never stopped, and flatness is the shape that has nothing left to lose. This is the patient physics of it. Not one great event, but the same event repeated past all arithmetic, each repetition subtracting a small unrest and leaving the whole a little more serene than before. And there is a strange, restful consequence hiding in that. Most things you know become more disordered when you leave them alone. A room left alone gathers dust. A garden left alone goes to seed. But this system, left entirely alone, does the opposite. It composes itself. Give it time and no interference, and it will trend towards the tidiest, flattest, most circular arrangement its own rules permit. Because every stray motion has somewhere to go and nothing to come back as. Disorder here is not conserved. It is spent. It is handed off in a million small touches and radiated away as a faint warmth into a sky that has room for all of it. So the picture to carry away is not a lid or a plate or a spinning disk, but a slow shearing river of ice, every lane overtaking the lane outside it, every particle keeping its own appointment with gravity, the whole thing bright and level and sorted by nothing more forceful than an eternity of ice touching ice at walking pace. It is a fall in progress, flakes suspended mid-descent, obeying a bargain written down in the 17th century and understood in the 19th by a man who never saw them closer than through a telescope and worked out their nature anyway, because the mathematics would not permit anything else. Whatever the fall eventually comes to, it is unhurried about it. It has been unhurried about it for an unimaginably long while. And in the meantime, in the long meantime that includes tonight, it goes on doing the one thing it knows how to do, meeting itself over and over at the pace of a hand set down, and becoming, with every one of those uncountable meetings, a little more at peace than it was before. There is a boundary out here, and you cannot see it. It has no edge, no shimmer, no line drawn across the dark to mark where one region of space becomes another. If you drifted through it, you would feel nothing at all, no threshold, no crossing, no faint click of arrival. And yet, it is one of the most consequential lines in the whole solar system, and it explains almost everything about the shape of the world beneath you. It is called the Roche limit, after Edouard Roche, a French mathematician who worked it out in the 1840s, sitting at a desk with paper and ink, long before anyone had photographs of what he was describing. He never saw Saturn the way you are seeing it now. He simply reasoned his way toward the place where a large body, held together by nothing but its own gravity, discovers that the planet is pulling on its near side a little harder than on its far side, and that the difference between those two pulls has grown larger, by the smallest of margins, than the grip the body has on itself. Think about what that actually means, physically, in the body itself. Gravity weakens with distance, and it weakens smoothly, without any sudden steps. So the face of a moon that looks toward Saturn is always being pulled a fraction more strongly than the face that looks away. The center is pulled by an amount somewhere in between. This is true everywhere, always, for every moon around every planet, and for the most part it amounts to nothing more than a lean, a slight stretch, a body drawn very faintly into the shape of an egg, with its long axis pointing at the planet. That is what a tide is. That is the whole of it. Not a wave, not a surge, just a difference of pull across the width of a thing. But bring that body inward, slowly, over an unimaginable span of time, and the difference across its width grows. The near side wants to fall a little faster. The far side wants to lag a little behind. And there comes a distance where the wanting exceeds the holding, where the material of the body no longer has enough self-attraction to insist on staying a sphere. What happens then is not a shattering. It is the opposite of a shattering. The body simply relaxes out of its own shape. It lengthens. It eases into the long axis it has been leaning toward for millions of years. The near side draws ahead in its orbit because it is a little closer in and a little faster. The far side falls behind because it is a little further out and a little slower. And the whole body, over a great many turns around the planet, unspools along the path it was already traveling. It opens. It draws itself out into a thread, and the thread lays itself around the planet, and the ends of the thread meet, and there is a bracelet where there used to be a sphere. Nothing was lost. Every grain of it remains here. Every grain of it remains in orbit. Every grain of it goes on traveling exactly where it was always traveling. Only now the whole of it is wide instead of round. The mass did not leave. The shape did. And a shape is a much easier thing to let go of than you might imagine, when you have 100 million years in which to do it, and no reason at all to hurry. This is why the arrangement of Saturn looks the way it does, rings close in, moons further out. Not because someone sorted them, but because inward of that invisible boundary a large body cannot easily hold its own shape, and outward of it, it can. The boundary is not a wall. Nothing bounces off it. Small things, a house-sized fragment, a boulder, a flake of ice, hold themselves together with material strength, with the simple stubbornness of solid matter, and they can sit anywhere they like. It is only the large bodies, the ones that are held together by gravity alone, that feel the preference, and that is a better word for it than any other, a preference. Space out here does not forbid. It leans. It suggests, very slowly, over spans of time long enough for suggestions to become facts. Which brings you to the question no one has finished answering. How old is this snow? When did the first flake begin to fall? For most of the time that people have been looking at Saturn through glass, the assumption was simple and ancient. The rings formed when the planet formed, 4.5 billion years ago, out of the same disk of gas and dust and ice that made everything else here, and they have been circling ever since. An original feature of the world, as old as the ground they are falling toward. It is a satisfying story. It makes the rings a birthmark. Then a spacecraft named Cassini spent 13 years in this system, and at the very end of its mission, it threaded itself through the narrow gap between the innermost ring and the cloud tops, over and over. And while it was in there, it did something no telescope could ever do. It felt the ring's pull on it. From the way its path bent, the total mass of all this ice could be weighed, and the answer came back small. Much smaller than a moon. All of this width, all of this brightness, all of these tens of thousands of kilometers of gleam, and if you gathered every grain of it into a single ball, you would have something modest, something you could tuck into a corner of this system without anyone noticing. Small mass matters because of the dirt. Space is not empty, it is faintly dusty, and the dust is dark, and it rains onto everything continuously at a rate that can be measured. Any surface exposed to the outer solar system for billions of years should be gray with it, the way an untouched shelf goes gray. And these rings are not gray. They are startlingly clean, better than 95 parts in 100 pure water ice. The whiteness of them almost embarrassing. A small mass cannot absorb much darkening before it begins to look dark. So the arithmetic pushes, insistently and awkwardly, toward youth. Perhaps 100 million years, perhaps a few 100 million, which would mean that when the earliest dinosaurs walked, this sky was empty. There was Saturn, banded and enormous, and above it nothing but stars, no arch, no snowfall in progress. It began after they were already here. Nobody knows what began it. There are candidate stories, and each of them is a way of moving something inward past that invisible preference. Perhaps an icy moon, one among many, had its orbit nudged over long ages by the tug of its neighbors, drifting closer by fractions, and one day found itself in the region where a large body stops being able to insist on itself and simply let go of its shape and became a bracelet. Perhaps two moons crossed paths, meeting at speeds that were, by the standards of space, almost neighborly, and the two of them slowed each other into a single wandering cloud that spread itself into a ring. Perhaps a comet came in from the far cold, was captured, swung too near, and unwound like thread from a spool. Perhaps the old answer is right after all, and there are researchers who argue exactly that the rings could be ancient, and that the ice could be cleaner than it looks, kept bright by the ceaseless grinding and recycling of particles against each other, so that fresh white surfaces are exposed as fast as old ones darken. That case has not been closed. It has only been debated, patiently, in papers written by people who will very likely never agree in their lifetimes. And here is a thing worth carrying with you into sleep. None of that uncertainty is a problem. It is not an unfinished chore. It is not a wound in the science that needs stitching before you can rest. It is simply the honest shape of what is known, and there is a great deal of room in it to lie down. You are looking at something whose beginning has not been dated. You are looking at a snowfall whose first hour is unrecorded, no witness, no mark, no moment anyone can point to and say, "There." That is when it started coming down. It may have begun before the oceans of your own world had settled. It may have begun while animals were already walking around under a Saturn with nothing above it. Either way, it is falling now. That is the part that is certain, and the part that needs no argument. Every flake of it is descending, imperceptibly, patiently, on a path that leads down toward those cloud tops, and the fall has been going on far longer than there have been eyes to notice, and it has not finished, and it will not finish for a very long time. Somewhere a body that used to be round eased out of its shape and became width instead, and the width is what you are lying beneath. What looks like a structure is a process, caught in the middle. What looks like an ornament is weather, arrested at the speed of geology. You do not need to know when it started. It does not need you to know. It only needs to keep coming down, flake after weightless flake, the ground waiting far below with all the time in the world, and you here, briefly, in the middle of the fall, closing your eyes inside it. There is a kind of music being played out here, and it is played so slowly that no single note of it could ever be heard in a human lifetime, and yet the score is written plainly across the rings for anyone patient enough to read it. The rings do not simply hang around Saturn in some undisturbed sheet. They are touched. They are touched from the outside, over and over, by moons that never come near enough to brush a single icy particle, and every one of those touches leaves a mark that lasts. Think of the rings as a sheet of paper laid flat, and the moons as hands that hover a long way above it, and yet somehow the paper carries the writing anyway. That is what orbital resonance does. It is the way a distant thing can write on a near thing without ever arriving. Here is how the pen works. Every particle in the rings is going around Saturn on its own circle, and the closer in it sits, the faster it goes, so that a chip of ice near the inner edge completes a lap in a matter of hours, while a moon far outside takes many times longer. Most of the time this mismatch means nothing. A particle and a moon drift past one another at some arbitrary place, and the moon's faint pull tugs the particle a little sideways, and then on the next lap they meet somewhere else entirely, and the tug comes from a different angle, and over thousands of laps all those little pulls point in every possible direction and cancel each other out into nothing at all. The particle keeps its circle. The moon keeps its own. Nothing accumulates, but there are special radii where the arithmetic locks. If a particle happens to sit at just the right distance, it will complete exactly 2 laps in the time the moon completes one, and then the two of them will meet again at precisely the same point in space, the same spot on the circle, lap after lap after lap. And now the tug is no longer random. Now it arrives at the same moment in the particle's swing every single time, always in the same direction, always adding to what came before. It is the difference between a hand slapping a swing at random and a hand pushing a swing at exactly the top of its arc. One push is almost nothing. 1,000 pushes timed correctly can carry a child to the height of the branch, note upon note upon note, always on the beat, until a nudge too faint to measure becomes a force that reshapes an entire region of ice. The most famous piece of writing done this way is the great dark lane you can see through a small telescope from a garden on Earth. The wide gap that seems to split the bright rings into 2 unequal halves. That lane is not empty, and it is not a rip, and nothing violent ever happened there. It is a 2-to-1 resonance with a moon called Mimas out beyond the ring system, small and pale and marked with one enormous crater. A particle orbiting in that lane goes around twice for each single circuit of Mimas, and so it receives that same rhythmic push at that same place forever. And over immense stretches of time, the pushes shepherd it out of the lane and into a more comfortable radius elsewhere. What remains is thinly populated, sparse rather than vacant, a corridor of scattered ice where the light no longer piles up thickly enough to look bright. A gap made not by removal, but by rhythm. A lane kept open by a moon that has never once touched it. Look closer at the places where these resonances land, and you find that the ring surface has been raised into ripples. Sprinkle sand across the skin of a drum and sound the drum, and the sand gathers itself into ridges and hollows, standing patterns that appear from nowhere and hold their shape as long as the note holds. The rings do the same thing. Out from each resonance point runs a spiral density wave, a tightly wound coil of alternating crowding and thinning, a place where the ice presses closer together and then eases apart and then presses again, wave crest after wave crest marching outward across the plain. Each wave is a wound-up spiral of many turns packed within a few tens of kilometers of ring, and the spacing of its crests narrows as it travels, so that the pattern reads like a bar of music written with the notes crowding tighter toward the end of the line. From a low vantage, you would not see waves at all. You would see the brightness of the ice breathing, brighter, dimmer, brighter, as though something were passing beneath a translucent floor. And there are waves that do not lie flat. If the moon's own orbit is tipped a little out of the ring plane, its pull has an up and down component as well as an in and out one, and the resonance writes that into the ice too. These are bending waves, and they lift the disk a few meters out of its own plane and then set it down again. A corrugation so shallow and so wide that if you were standing on it, you would never feel the slope. The entire vast sheet, thinner in proportion than a sheet of paper the width of a city, flexes into a barely perceptible corrugated ribbon, rising and falling by less than the height of a house across distances larger than continents. It is the most tranquil undulation in the solar system. A field of snow lifting and settling with a breath that takes years to complete. Some moons do not write from a distance. Some of them live inside the rings, in the gaps they have swept for themselves, small and lonely and utterly at ease. Inside the Enki gap there is a moon named Pan, only about 30 kilometers across, and it has spent its life plowing a clear channel through the ice and sweeping up the material that fell onto it. The debris settled around its middle and built a flattened ridge along its equator, so that Pan now looks less like a moon and more like something from a kitchen table, a small ravioli, a walnut, a pale dumpling with a seam pressed around its waist. It rides its empty lane at the center of a road it made itself, and the ring walls stand to either side of it, patient and level, the way snowbanks stand beside a path that someone cleared long ago. Inside the narrower Keeler gap there is Daphnis, smaller yet, 8 kilometers of ice riding an orbit tipped very slightly out of the plane. As it passes along the gap, it pulls on the material at each edge, and the edges answer. They rise into standing waves, scalloped crests running along the rim like the hem of a curtain caught in a drought, each crest a little behind the last, the whole pattern trailing away behind the moon for hundreds of kilometers and slowly relaxing back to smoothness. When the sun lies low across the plain, those waves throw shadows out onto the ice, long fingers of shade lying across a white floor, and for a while you can see in shadow the exact shape of a touch that happened hours ago. Not every body out there is large enough to open a lane of its own. Some are only the size of a house, and when they try to clear their surroundings, they manage only a partial job, pushing the ice aside, just ahead and just behind, and leaving a pair of curved dark marks that fan out to either side. From above, these look exactly like little propellers scattered through the bright ice, thousands of them, each one marking a small object hiding at its center that no camera has ever resolved directly. You cannot see the moonlets. You can only see the shape of what they do. And then there is the F-ring, a narrow bright thread outside the main system, braided and knotted and kinked, held together by 2 moons that ride on either side of it. Prometheus travels a little inside, going slightly faster, and Pandora travels a little outside, going slightly slower, and between them they keep the thread from spreading away into nothing. Prometheus draws long, dark streamers of material out of the ring each time it swings closest, leaving behind a row of channels like the marks of a comb through fine hair. Nothing is being destroyed. Something is being tended. Shepherding is the right word for it. The moons are not fencing the ice in. They are walking beside it, one on either flank, keeping the flock loosely together across a road that has no edges. And all of this happens in perfect silence. There is no air out here to carry a single sound, so the waves that ripple through the ice make no noise at all. And the standing crests along the gap edges rise and subside without so much as a whisper. And the enormous slow corrugation of the bending waves lifts and lowers a sheet the width of a planet without one creak or sigh. The music is real, but it is written in position rather than in pressure, in where things are rather than in what you could hear. You would have to watch for 1,000 years to catch a single measure of it. So the rings are not merely an unfinished snowfall, a fall that began long ago and has not yet reached the ground of Saturn's clouds waiting far below. They are a snowfall that has been written on while it descends. Every flake suspended mid-descent is holding a position that some far-off moon suggested to it, and the suggestion was made not once, but 1,000,000 times over, always at the same beat, always in the same direction, until the whole field of falling snow arranged itself into lanes and ripples and hems. The rings are a surface that remembers every touch it has received. Nothing here has been forgotten, and nothing here has been erased, and the pattern you would see beneath you is simply the accumulated record of a conversation carried on for millions of years between bodies that have never met, each one speaking in a rhythm so slow that a single syllable takes a day, each answer written into the ice and left there, legible, unhurried, waiting for the fall to finish. Let yourself be set down inside it now, not looking at it from a distance, not watching it turn on a screen with a number printed under it, but placed within the body of the B-ring itself, somewhere in the thick, bright middle of that band, weightless and unhurt and needing nothing at all. Nothing about you has to work here. Nothing about you has to be held together by effort. You are simply there, at rest, in the middle of a fall that has been going on for a very long time, and the fall has room for you. You are carried. That is the first thing, and it may be the only thing that matters. There is no floor beneath you and no ceiling above you, and yet there is no sense of dropping, no lurch in the chest, no reaching for something to hold, because everything around you is doing exactly what you are doing, at exactly the same pace, in exactly the same direction. You are carried the way a leaf is carried on a wide river that has no banks. You are carried the way a note is carried inside a long cord. You are carried the way sleep carries you, which is to say completely, and without asking anything of you in return. There is no sound, not muffled sound, not distant sound, not the low hum of a room at night, but the true absence of it, because sound is a thing that air does, and there is no air here to do it. All around you, ice is meeting ice. Pieces are drifting into one another, nudging, resting against each other for a moment, easing apart again. And every one of those meetings happens without the smallest noise. A boulder of ice the size of a bedroom brushes another, and they part in complete silence. 10,000 such touches are happening within a short distance of you, right now, and not one of them makes a sound. It is the most crowded place you will ever be, and it is the most wordless. You are carried among white things. Look at what passes you. Ice. Almost all of it water ice. whiter and cleaner than anything on any beach, whiter than the snow on a roof at first light. Some of the pieces are the size of a fist, turning slowly as they go by, catching the light on one facet and then another. Some are the size of a suitcase. Some are the size of a room, whole rooms of ice with rounded corners and dusted surfaces, drifting past at the pace of a person walking without any particular need to arrive. A hand's breadth from your face, a small one goes by. You could reach out and touch it. It would not strike you. It would meet your palm the way a boat meets a dock in an unhurried harbor, with a pressure so mild you would question whether it happened. There is no rushing here. There is no wind, because wind is air moving, and there is none. There is no roar, no grinding, no clatter. The whole ring is a slow crowd, a patient traffic, everything traveling the same way at nearly the same speed, so that from where you float the neighbors seem barely to move at all. And this is the strange kindness of the place you are, in truth. Traveling many times faster than any bullet ever fired, sweeping around an enormous planet at a speed that would cross a country in a breath, and you feel absolutely none of it. Nothing streams past. Nothing whistles. Your neighbors share your motion so exactly that the vast speed becomes invisible. The way the speed of the earth beneath your bed tonight is invisible to you, though you are being flung around the sun this very second faster than you can imagine, and your pillow does not move under your head. There is a snow here that began falling a very long time ago and has not yet reached the ground. You are inside that snowfall. You are one of the flakes for a while, suspended mid-descent, keeping company with the others. Far below you, beyond the thin plain you are drifting in, the ground waits. The pale banded cloud tops of Saturn, patient, unbothered, in no hurry to receive what is coming. And nothing is coming quickly. The fall is measured in ages. We simply happen to be here in the middle of it, you and I, watching a snowfall in progress, at a moment when almost none of it has landed. You are carried in winter light. The sun from here is not a disk you could shade with a hand. It is a point, a small, fierce star, bright enough to make you turn your head, and yet so far away that its light arrives at about 1 part in 100 of the strength it has on a summer lawn at home. This is the light of an afternoon in deep winter, an hour before dusk, an hour when the world goes pearl-colored and the edges of things go tender. Everything around you is lit like that. The ice does not blaze, it glows mildly, the way a page glows near a window on an overcast day. And the light does not only fall on you from above. This is the detail that makes the place feel inhabited rather than empty. Below your drifting body hangs Saturn, an enormous pale creature of cloud, and its cloud tops throw sunlight back upward, so the light comes from beneath as well. The underside of every flake around you is lit. The lower faces of the boulders, the shadowed halves of the fist-sized fragments, the parts that on Earth would be dark, are all washed in a faint upward glow, the color of butter and old ivory. Nothing here has a black side. Nothing here is half abandoned by the light. Every piece of the unfinished snow is lit above and lit below, and so are you. You are carried beside a giant. Turn your attention downward, and one whole side of the sky is not sky at all, but planet. A curved wall of banded cream and amber and pale gold, so wide that it does not end where you expect an object to end. So wide that your sense of what counts as a horizon quietly gives up. The bands lie in long parallel belts, some lighter, some more ochre, and they slide past one another at their own speeds, because this world has no solid surface to force them to agree. It turns quickly for something so large. A full day there lasts about 10.5 hours, so the bands are perceptibly in motion, an immense slow parade of weather that never repeats and never hurries and never once notices you watching. You are carried in a plane. Look out along the ring instead of down, and the ice extends away from you in both directions, thinning with distance into a bright road, into a haze, into a line, until it meets a horizon that is not the edge of anything, but simply the limit of what your eye can resolve. Behind you, it does the same. You are lying inside a floor of light that reaches farther than sight, and yet this floor is thinner than the thickness of most of it would suggest. So thin that if you rose a short way, you would look down on the whole shining sheet from outside. There is no effort required of you here. There is no direction you must face. There is no up that insists on being up, and so falling and being carried turn out to be the same motion, made of the same thing, indistinguishable from the inside. Everything around you is falling toward Saturn. Every fist of ice, every drifting room of it, every grain too fine to see, is falling, and is also traveling sideways fast enough that the falling never arrives, and the result of those two truths pressed together is this: a serene, level, endless being held. You are falling. You are held. There is no difference. The physics that keeps a moon in the sky and the physics that lets a hand under your back take your weight are, out here, the very same physics, and it asks nothing of you. You are carried, and you are unharmed, and you are not alone in it, because 100 billion white companions are keeping pace beside you with the tact of things that will never crowd and never leave. Rest with that a moment, because the same thing is true where you actually are. Your bed tonight is not a fixed point. It is a place on the outside of a turning world, sweeping eastward through the dark at a speed you cannot feel. And that turning world is itself running around a star at some 19 miles every second. And that star is carrying all of it. You and your bed and the room and the whole neighborhood of planets on a long circuit through the galaxy that takes more than 200 million years to complete. You are moving in 3 or 4 ways at once. You are moving faster than any thought you have ever had about speed. And you feel none of it, not one tremor, not one lean, because everything near you is coming along too, exactly as the ice does, exactly as the unfinished snow does around the body you were just imagining out there in the winter light. The whole of it is being carried. You do not have to hold on, and you never did. The ice does not hold on. The moons do not hold on. The snow that has not landed is under no strain at all. It is simply going where it is going, lit from above and lit from below, in no danger, in no hurry, and neither, tonight, are you. There is something happening in the rings that you cannot see from here, and that no telescope on Earth could ever show you directly, and it is the tenderest process in the entire system. The rings are draining. Not violently, not in some collapse, not in any way that would look like an event if you were floating there, watching with your own eyes for 100 years at a stretch. They are draining the way a long snowfall finishes, one flake at a time, each one leaving the crowd and drifting down toward the ground that has been waiting for it since the beginning. Because that is what this is. The rings are an unfinished snowfall. The snow began falling a very long time ago, and it has not yet reached the ground, and Saturn's cloud tops are the ground. And we happen to have arrived in the middle of the fall. Picture the finest grains out there, the ones too small to call ice cubes, the ones closer to smoke than to hail. Sunlight lands on them constantly, And sunlight is not only warmth, it is also a hand that can knock electrons loose. Around Saturn there is also a thin haze of charged particles, a faint plasma that drifts and glows and touches everything it passes. Between the two of them, some of those tiny grains lose their electrical neutrality. They pick up a charge. And the moment a grain of ice carries a charge, something in its life changes completely. Until that moment, it belonged to gravity alone, and gravity is a patient and single-minded master, holding every particle in a level circle, letting nothing wander. But a charged grain has a second master now. It can feel Saturn's magnetic field. And the magnetic field does not care about circles. The field runs in great curved lines that leave the planet's equator, arc far out into space, and come back down into the northern and southern hemispheres, and a charged grain of ice, once it feels those lines, is no longer free to keep orbiting. It is escorted. It slides along the curve like a bead on a wire, out of the plane it has held for ages, down and inward, toward the middle latitudes of the planet, where it meets the top of the atmosphere and warms and turns to vapor and joins the clouds. The flake lands. The fall, for that one grain, is over. Nobody guessed this from theory first. It came, as so much does, from someone noticing a shadow. When astronomers looked carefully at Saturn's upper atmosphere, they found dark bands at certain latitudes, faint stripes in the high haze that did not match the weather, did not match the seasons, did not match anything the planet was doing on its own. The bands sat exactly where the magnetic field lines from the rings would come down. Something was arriving there. Something was falling into the atmosphere along those lines and changing the chemistry where it landed, thinning the haze, leaving a mark like the wet patch on a windowsill under an open window in winter. That was the first hint that the snow was reaching the ground. Then, a spacecraft went and stood in the falling snow. In its final months, out of fuel and headed for the end of its long work, the Cassini probe was sent into a set of orbits nobody had dared before. 22 dives through the narrow gap between the top of the atmosphere and the inner edge of the rings, threading a space so thin that the whole plan had once been considered too risky to attempt. 22 times it fell through the gap, and each time it opened its instruments and simply tasted what was there. Not photographed. Tasted. It let the falling material strike its detectors and counted what came in, grain by grain and molecule by molecule. Water and methane and ammonia and carbon compounds and dust, all of it drifting down out of the rings toward the clouds. And the rain was heavier than anyone had expected, far heavier. The numbers that came back described a downpour, not a drizzle. Enough material is arriving at Saturn to fill an Olympic swimming pool with water every half hour. Every half hour, another pool full of ancient ice, sliding down the field lines, entering the atmosphere, becoming weather. It has been doing that continuously for as long as the rings have existed, and it is doing it right now, while you lie here, while your breathing slows, while nothing at all in your room changes. At that rate, the arithmetic is not comforting to anyone who wants things to last forever. The rings have something on the order of 100 million years left, perhaps a few 100 million if the rain eases. That sounds like a great deal of time, and it is, but Saturn is 4.5 billion years old, and against that span, 100 million years is a single held breath. The snow is landing faster than it can be replaced. The fall is finishing, and here is where the whole picture turns over, if you let it, and becomes something else entirely. Nothing is being lost, not 1 gram. Every flake of that snow is going exactly where it was always going. Ice that formed out there, that has circled in the light for an unimaginable stretch of time, is not vanishing when it enters the clouds. It is arriving. It is reaching the surface it has been descending toward the entire time. The ground has been waiting far below, the way ground always waits under a snowfall, and the snow is doing what snow does. There is no failure in it. There is no wound. A ring is not a thing that has been broken open. It is a fall in progress, flakes suspended mid-descent, and the descent has a destination, and the destination is the planet itself. When the last of it comes down, Saturn will not have lost its rings. Saturn will have received them. Think how the timing lands. 4.5 billion years of history in this one place, the gathering of the planet, the slow settling of its bands, the arrival and departure of moons, the long ages before anything encircled it at all. And the rings, whatever gave birth to them, have existed for a sliver of that. And within that sliver, in the narrow window where the snow is in the air and has not yet landed, a species on a small warm world grew eyes, and then lenses, and then the patience to point them upward, and looked. If we had opened our eyes 100 million years later, there might have been nothing there but a faint dusty haze and a story no one could prove. If we had opened them early enough, there might have been no rings yet to see. Instead, we arrived in the middle of the fall. Of every era we could have been handed, we were handed the one where the snow is mid-air. That is not a small piece of luck. That is the kind of coincidence that, if you sit with it long enough, feels less like chance and more like an invitation. So let the thought settle here, without weight. Everything you have ever loved to look at has been temporary, and the temporariness was never the sad part. A snowfall is not sad because it lands. It is beautiful precisely because it is happening now, because it is in motion, because you have to be present to see it. If the rings were permanent, they would be furniture. Because they are a fall in progress, they are alive, they are going somewhere. They have a direction and a destination and a moment, and the moment happens to be ours. You are alive during the falling. That is the whole gift. And it is happening at a pace that nothing in you needs to keep up with. A pool full of water every half hour, arriving without noise, arriving without any observer, arriving whether or not anyone on this planet is awake to think about it. Somewhere out there, right now, a single grain of ice that has orbited for millions of years is picking up a charge from the light and feeling the field take hold of it and beginning the last curve of its long descent, and it will meet the high clouds and turn to vapor and become part of the weather of a planet, and that is the end of its journey and also the completion of it. It is not falling away from anything. It is falling home. And behind it come the next, and the next, in a procession too fine and too unhurried to register as movement, each one making the same crossing, each one keeping the same appointment, a delivery that has never once paused and has never once been rushed, arriving at the same low latitudes tonight that it arrived at before there were tides on this world, or continents, or anyone to name them. Let your body follow the same easy logic. Nothing needs to be held in place. Nothing has to keep its shape forever to have been worth making. The rings are lowering themselves into the planet at a rate no eye could ever catch, and the planet is taking them in, and the whole slow exchange is as untroubled as breath leaving a sleeping chest. You are permitted to find that restful rather than sorrowful. You are permitted to be moved by something ending well. Somewhere far above your ceiling, above the weather, above the dark, an old snow is finishing its fall onto a ground that has waited a very long time to receive it. And you are here for it, and the only thing being asked of you is to be here, and to let go, and to drift down through the layers of your own evening the way the ice drifts down through the light. Saturn leans. That is the first thing to hold, and it is a restful thing to hold. Because leaning is what a body does when it has decided to rest against something. The planet's axis tips about 27 degrees away from upright, almost exactly the tilt of your own world, and it carries that lean around the sun without ever correcting it, without ever straightening. The way a sleeping person keeps one shoulder lower than the other for hours and never thinks to adjust. And because the rings lie flat around the planet's waist, locked to that leaning equator, the whole enormous disk leans with it. The rings do not tilt on their own. They are simply carried, held level to the world they belong to, tipped by whatever amount the world is tipped. Faithful in a way that requires no effort at all. Now let the planet move. One trip around the sun takes Saturn about 29.5 of your years, which means that the seasons out there are measured not in months, but in something closer to the length of a childhood. And as it travels, the lean stays pointed the same way in space, while the sun's position changes around it. And so the rings, seen from where you are, open and close. At one point in the long orbit, the disk turns its full face toward you, wide open, catching the sunlight across the whole width of the ice, so bright that a small telescope on a cold night shows it as a shape rather than a smudge. Then, over years, the angle narrows, the open oval slims to a slot, and the slot slims to a blade, and the blade slims to a line. Roughly every 15 years, the geometry brings the plane of the rings edge onto your line of sight, and for a short season, the most famous object in the sky simply is not there. Think about what that means for a life. If you begin watching as a child and keep watching, you can see the rings open, close, and open again, perhaps 3 times before you are done. You would not need instruments beyond the modest ones already common in ordinary homes. You would only need to keep coming back. 3 openings, 3 closings, spread across the whole arc of a person, so that the same shape becomes a kind of slow clock you share a room with. Most things you can measure are either faster than you, or so much slower that they never move. This one keeps pace with you, near enough, and there is something companionable in that. The crossing itself is worth lingering over, because it happens by degrees and it happens with no drama whatsoever. Month by month, the ellipse flattens. What was an oval becomes an oval pressed thin, then a narrow band, then a hairline scratch of light drawn straight across the planet's middle, and then the hairline dims and thins past the limit of what any lens can hold, and the disk is gone. What remains is a plain pale sphere, banded, featureless at the waist, looking for all the world like a planet that never had rings and never will. Nothing has been lost. The ice is exactly where it was. You are simply looking at a sheet of paper along its edge, and a sheet of paper only 20 meters thick in some places, spread across 280,000 kilometers of width, has almost no edge to show you. It is the thinnest large thing anyone has ever measured, and once every 15 years or so, it takes the opportunity to prove it. The first person to live through this did not know that was what he was living through. In 1610, Galileo turned his small, imperfect telescope toward Saturn and saw something on either side of the planet that he could not resolve. 2 attendants, 2 handles. Ears is the word that has come down to us. He wrote about them, puzzled over them, and kept looking. And then, 2 years later, they were gone. He looked and found nothing but the plain sphere, and he had no framework in which vanishing was a normal seasonal event, no way to know that he had simply arrived in time for the crossing. He wondered, in writing, whether he had been deceived. He had not been. He had been early, which is a different thing, and the ears returned for him later, and the shape he could not name went on opening and closing long after the argument about what he had seen had faded from anyone's mind. Twice in each of those 29-year circuits, Saturn arrives at equinox, and equinox is when the geometry does something extraordinary to the light. At equinox, the sun stands exactly in the plane of the rings. Sunlight arrives not from above the disk, but along it, skimming, grazing, running flat across the ice the way late afternoon light runs flat across a field. And on a surface that is essentially two-dimensional, that flattest surface anywhere in the solar system, the effect is startling. Every vertical thing suddenly acquires a shadow, and the shadows are enormous. A ridge only a few meters high, a bump, a rumple, a wave standing up out of the plain, throws a dark stripe that reaches for tens of kilometers. A small moon riding in a gap, a body a few kilometers across, casts a shadow so long it lies across the ice like a road. Hundreds of kilometers of darkness trailing away from a thing you could walk around in an afternoon. Corrugations that had never been visible in all the years of observation stand up in relief. Clumps that had lain hidden inside the general brightness announce themselves. For a short season, the flattest place we know of shows its texture. The way a lawn shows every dip and rise when the winter sun comes in low and level and refuses to look down from above. And then there are the spokes, which are the loveliest unresolved thing in the whole system. Over the broad, bright B ring, faint radial markings sometimes appear, dark against the ice, reaching outward from inner edge toward outer like the shadows of fingers laid across a lit surface. They are not gaps, and they are not structures in the usual sense. They appear to be enormous drifts of extremely fine dust, particles about the size of the smoke from a candle, lifted a small distance clear of the ring plane and held there by electric charge, floating just above the ice rather than embedded in it. They form over the course of an hour or two. They shear and smear as the ring rotates beneath them, the inner end of each mark traveling faster than the outer end, so that a shape which began as a straight radial finger slowly bends into a curve, leaning back on itself, drawn out by the same difference in speed that governs everything else in the disk. They fade. New ones arrive, and they arrive in the same broad territory, over the bright ice of the B ring, and rarely anywhere else, as though that one region of the snowfall were the only part willing to breathe. The Voyager spacecraft found them first, on their way through, and returned images that nobody had been prepared for, and in the decades since we have learned a great deal about when they come and almost nothing certain about why. They cluster around the equinox seasons and thin away toward solstice, so that when the sunlight stands high above the plane, the spokes largely stop appearing, and when the light comes in flat, they return. They keep a season. Whatever raises them is listening to the angle of the light, and we do not entirely know what it is listening with. There is something worth resting in there. Here is a phenomenon photographed thousands of times, catalogued, measured, timed, watched by an orbiting spacecraft for 13 years, and by telescopes above your own atmosphere for decades more. And the honest state of the matter is that we have several good ideas and no settled answer. That is not a failure, and it is not a gap that ought to worry anyone. It is a door left open in a warm house, somewhere in the physics of charged dust and shadowed ice and the planet's own vast magnetic field. There is an explanation waiting. patient, entirely willing to be found in a year or in a century. And it will not stop happening in the meantime. The spokes will keep arriving on schedule, whether or not anyone understands them. The universe has never once required our comprehension as a condition of continuing. And through all of it, the snow keeps not landing. That is what you are watching when you watch the rings open and close across your life. A snowfall that began an unimaginably long time ago and has not yet reached the ground. The flakes spread out across a width that could hold 20 Earths side by side, the ground itself waiting far below in the pale-banded cloud tops, in no hurry, entirely prepared to wait. The tilt does not change the fall. The seasons do not change the fall. Equinox only means that for a little while the low light shows you the shapes inside it, every ripple and rise standing up in shadow, every suspended flake briefly given depth. And when the disk thins to a line and disappears from your view, nothing has stopped. The fall is in progress. It was in progress before Galileo. It was in progress while he wondered whether his own eyes had misled him, and it will be in progress long after the question of the spokes is answered by someone not yet born. You happened to arrive in the middle of it. You are allowed to simply watch, and to let the watching be enough, and to let your own attention move at the pace of something that has already been falling for longer than there have been eyes to see it. Let the picture widen now, slowly, the way your eyes widen in a dark room until the furniture arrives out of nothing, and you realize you could have found your way across it all along. Begin with the light, because the light is the easiest thing to hold. Saturn sits about 9.5 times further from the sun than we do, which means the sunlight falling on those rings has been traveling for something close to 80 minutes before it touches a single grain of ice. 8 minutes brings it here. 80 minutes brings it there. And then that light, having arrived, has to turn around and come all the way back before any of it reaches an eye or a lens or a photographic plate, so that the shine you would see on the outer edge of the rings left the surface of the sun before you lay down tonight, before you turned off the lamp, before you began the small ceremony of arranging the pillow the way you like it. Everything you would be looking at is already the past, arriving late, arriving in good order, arriving without hurry. There is nothing you can do to speed it up, and nothing you need to do to keep it coming. Hold the planet itself for a moment. Saturn is large in a way that resists being imagined all at once, so take it in pieces. You could pour more than 700 Earths into the volume of it and have room to spare. 700 of everything you have ever walked across, every coastline and mountain range and city and field poured in like sand into a jar, and the jar not yet full. And here is the part that never loses its charm, no matter how many times it is said. For all that bulk, Saturn is made mostly of hydrogen and helium, and it is so low in density that if you could find an ocean wide enough and deep enough to set it in, the whole enormous thing would float. The largest object for 1 billion miles in any direction, and it would bob. It would ride the surface like a lantern on water. There is something almost comic in it, and something tender too. The reminder that size and weight are not the same thing, that a body can be vast and yet built out of almost nothing, that the grandest structures are often the lightest. And around this floating giant, the snow that has not landed. The rings stretch outward so far that if you laid the span of them against the distance from here to the moon, the rings would win. Wider than the gap that took our own explorers 3 days to cross. And their thickness across most of their reach is measured in tens of feet. less than the height of many rooms. If you could shrink the whole ring system down to the width of a city and keep the proportions honest, it would be thinner than a sheet of paper, thinner than tissue, so thin that from the side it disappears entirely, and the planet appears to have set the whole thing down for a moment. That is the shape of it, a fall in progress, spread absurdly wide and pressed absurdly flat, every flake keeping to its own level, because the physics has had time to sort them all out. The ground is far below. The cloud tops are waiting. Nothing has arrived yet. Now let the same widening happen to time, which is the harder of the two, and the more consoling. The rings, as best we can read them, may be young, perhaps 100 million years, perhaps somewhat more. 100 million years of falling snow that has not finished falling. Set that against the planet underneath, which has been turning for 4.5 billion years, which was already ancient when the rings began, which will be turning long after they have settled. And set both of those against the thing you are actually doing tonight, which is lying down for one human night, 7 or 8 hours, a single small revolution of your own body from tired to rested. You might expect that comparison to shrink you. It does not have to. Watch what it actually does. A night is not made shorter by the age of a planet. Your sleep is not made less real by the fact that ice has been drifting somewhere for 100 million years without needing your permission. If anything, the comparison lifts a weight off, because it tells you plainly that the enormous slow business of the universe is fully staffed and does not require you. Nothing out there is waiting on you tonight. The ice does not need to be watched in order to keep its orbit. Not one particle in that vast unfinished snowfall will drift out of line because you closed your eyes. The gaps will keep their edges. The shepherd moons will keep their patient rounds. The waves that ripple through the ice will keep rippling at exactly the pace they have kept since long before anyone here had a word for any of it. The physics is patient, and it will carry on without your attention, which is precisely why your attention is allowed to be set down now, unguarded, off-duty, free. That is the whole permission, and it is worth saying without ornament. So much of what keeps a person awake is the belief that something depends on continued watching, that if you stop holding the thread will drop. Out there is a working demonstration to the contrary, running at full scale, 90 times further away than the sun is close, entirely unbothered. It has been running the whole time you were awake today, and it will run through every hour of your sleep, and it will run tomorrow, and it will not once check to see whether anyone was looking. And it turns out that this is not even rare. Point our instruments at Jupiter, and there is a ring there, faint, made of dust knocked off small moons by tiny impacts. Point them at Uranus, and there are narrow dark rings, thin as pencil lines, discovered because a star blinked several times on its way behind the planet. Point them at Neptune, and there are rings again, uneven, gathered into arcs like drifts of snow banked against a fence. Every one of the giant planets wears something. Rings are not a miracle handed to one world. They are what happens, ordinarily and repeatedly, when a large planet keeps company with small icy things and enough time goes by. Saturn is simply the one caught in its brightest hour, the one whose snowfall happens to be thick and clean and bright, while we are here with the eyes to see it. We arrived in the middle of the fall. Of all the things to be lucky about, that is a good one. There is something honest to be said about why anyone looks up at all. It is not for information. Nobody has ever gone out into the cold at midnight in order to be better informed. People look up because looking up rearranges the size of their own troubles for a while, because the neck tilts back and the chest opens and the day loosens its grip, because there is a specific and very old kind of relief in seeing that the ceiling of the world goes on much further than the ceiling of the room. Your ancestors did this. They did it without knowing what any of it was, and it worked for them anyway. The comfort was never in understanding. The comfort was in the looking, and there is a tenderness in loving something that will outlast you. The rings will be there long after tonight, long after this year, long after every plan you are carrying. That is not a loss. It is a kind of company. It means there is something in the arrangement of things that does not depend on you being here to keep it going, something you can hand your attention to, and then take your attention back from without any harm done. You get to love a thing that will go on. And in the same evening, in the same breath, you get to love the things that will not go on. The particular warmth of this bed, the sound of this house at this hour, the people whose voices you know by their first syllable, all of it temporary, all of it passing, all of it made more precious and not less by the passing. Both loves fit in one chest. They do not compete. The long thing gives the short thing its setting, the way a wide dark sky gives a single lit window its glow. So let the latter rest where it is. Light that set out before you did, arriving on time, a world 700 Earths across that would float if you could find water enough. A snowfall as wide as the road to the moon and thinner than the room you are lying in. 100 million years of descent, 4.5 billion years of turning, and one night, yours, tonight, small in the counting, and not at all small in the living of it. Somewhere the ice is going around, edge-lit, keeping its patient rows, in no hurry to land, and the ground it is falling toward has been waiting so long that another few hours are nothing at all. You can let it fall without you. It has been managing beautifully. It will keep managing while your breathing lengthens and your hands loosen, and the day you carried in here finally sets itself down, and all of that suspended brightness will go on drifting, unhurried, unfinished, exactly as it has been. Tonight has been about a snowfall that has not landed yet. Tonight has been about a pale point of light in a cold sky, and about the people who leaned over their eyepieces in unheated rooms trying to make sense of it, and about how long it took, and about how gracious the universe was to let them get there in the end. Tonight has been about Galileo seeing 3 bodies where there was one, and about the year the handles vanished and he did not know why, and about Huygens turning a lens against a grinding wheel through a whole winter until he could see a band that touched the planet nowhere. Tonight has been about a dark lane between 2 bright arcs, and about the patience of people who never learned the whole answer and looked anyway. Tonight has been about ice, about water ice, almost pure, brighter than any snow you have walked across, arranged in pieces the size of dust, and pieces the size of a fist, and pieces the size of the room you are lying in. About how each of those pieces holds its own orbit, keeps its own path, minds its own long circle, and meets its neighbors only in touches too slow to be called collisions at all. About a structure 280,000 kilometers across and 10 meters deep, wide as the road to the moon and thin as a hallway, thinner in proportion than any sheet of paper you have ever folded. Tonight has been about the patient physics of the title, about the way the inner edge overtakes the outer edge forever and never once pulls away from it. About Maxwell with his pencil showing that no solid ring could survive, that the only stable answer was a crowd. About countless small meetings, each one taking a little energy out of the system and leaving it flatter and rounder and more at rest than it was before, so that the whole disk has been settling itself towards serenity for longer than there have been flowers on the earth. Tonight has been about moons that write on ice, about Mimas keeping a lane thinly populated by arriving at the same place at the same time, again and again, the way a hand pushes a swing. About waves spreading outward from a resonance like the pattern raised on a drumskin. About Pan and Daphnis making their small hems and scallops in the gaps they keep open. About a surface that remembers every touch it has ever received. And tonight has been about time. About a moon that came too near and relaxed out of its own shape and opened into a bracelet. About charged grains riding down the field lines into the clouds, delivering a swimming pool of water every half hour to the world below. About a fall that began perhaps 100 million years ago and has not finished. And about the extraordinary and unearned luck of being here in the middle of it, with our eyes open, in the one brief chapter when the snow is in the air. Tonight has been about seasons, too. About a world leaning 27 degrees away from upright and taking 29.5 of our years to go once around the sun, so that the rings open and close across a human life like a slow eye. About the years they thin to a line, and then to a hairline, and then to nothing at all, and the years they stand wide open and blazing. About equinox, when the light comes in level along the plain, and every ridge only meters high throws a shadow hundreds of kilometers long, so that the flattest thing in the solar system briefly shows its face. About the spokes, the faint radial fingers over the B-ring that come and go with the seasons and that nobody has fully explained, and about how good it is to have something left unexplained. It is a snow that has not landed. It is a fall in progress. It is a thing on its way, and it has been on its way since long before anyone was here to notice. And it will be on its way long after tonight is over. It does not need to arrive tonight. It does not need to be understood tonight. It does not need to be anything other than what it already is. There is ice out there turning in the dark. There is a wave spreading through that ice at the pace of a thought. There is a small moon keeping a hem in a gap, doing it now, doing it while you lie here, doing it whether or not anyone is looking. The ice does not need you to watch it. The orbits do not need you to keep track of them. The waves in the A-ring do not need to be counted tonight, or ever, by you. Nothing out there is waiting on you. Nothing out there is behind schedule. Nothing out there requires your attention in order to carry on being exactly what it is. None of this needs anything from you tonight. Not one particle of it. The whole system has been holding itself together with no assistance from you for 100 million years, and it will manage the next few hours without your help as well. There is nothing to finish. There is nothing to fix. There is nothing you have forgotten that cannot wait until the light comes back. The physics is patient, and because it is patient, you are allowed to be. Whatever you were carrying into this room tonight can be set down at the edge of the bed and picked up again in the morning, or not. If you would like to keep drifting, there are other long nights waiting on the channel, other worlds and other slow evenings, and one of them will begin on its own when this one ends, so you do not have to decide anything or reach for anything. Let it play. Let it carry you the way the ice is carried. And if some part of you is somehow awake enough to want to leave a word behind, here is a question you might sit with, or answer in the comments some other day, when you are rested. If you could drift for 1 hour anywhere in that snowfall, at the pace of a slow walk, with nothing to fear and nothing to do, Which part of the rings would you choose? And would you look outward, or would you look down at the enormous banded world beneath you? You do not have to answer that now. You do not have to answer it at all. It is only a place to rest the mind, the way you might rest a hand on a windowsill. Now let the rest of it go. Let the shoulders come down again, further than the first time, all the way down. Let the arms be heavy. Let the hands be open, or curled, whichever they already are, and leave them alone. Let the jaw unhook. Let the tongue lie flat and easy behind the teeth. Let the small muscles around the eyes stop holding, the ones you never notice until they let go, the ones that have been working since morning. Let the breath go out long and low, and then let it come back in without being asked. Out again, in again. You do not have to manage it. It has been doing this without instruction since the day you arrived, and it knows the way. And if the mind starts up again, that is fine. That is what minds do. Let the thought pass the way a piece of ice passes, unhurried, weightless, going somewhere of its own, close enough to see and not close enough to touch you. Somewhere out beyond the sunlight you have ever felt on your face. At a distance the light takes 80 minutes to cross. A pale banded world is turning through the middle of its 10.5-hour day, and around it 100 million years of snow is going down towards the clouds, one flake at a time, in silence, without effort, without any need to arrive tonight. You are being carried too. The bed beneath you, and the floor beneath that, and the ground beneath that are all moving around a star at a speed you will never feel, and have been for as long as you have been alive, and will be tomorrow. Nothing is required of you. Nothing is expected. You have already done today. Let it be dark. Let it be late. Let it be enough. Sleep well.